There comes a moment when you just get tired of trying to carry everything, fix everything, control everything. You wake up and realize that no matter how hard you try, there's always something waiting to weigh you down. And that's because you were never meant to carry it all. God never created you to hold every burden, every heartbreak, every fear in your own hands. He didn't design you to live a life of constant tension, anxiety, and striving. He created you to walk with Him, to lean on Him, and to trust that He can handle what you can't. But we forget that, don't we? We get caught up thinking that faith means we have to be strong all the time, that we have to smile through pain, pretend like we're not breaking, act like we can do it all on our own. We wear strength like a mask when deep down we're trembling. And yet God is standing there saying, you don't have to do this by yourself. He's saying, give it to me. But instead of surrendering, we hold tighter because letting go feels scary. It feels like losing control. Sometimes we confuse surrender with weakness. We think if we don't have all the answers, we're failing. But surrender isn't giving up. It's letting God in. It's saying, God, I've reached my limit. I can't carry this pain anymore. Can't fix what's broken. I can't be strong in every storm. It's an act of strength to hand over what's crushing you. You are not weak because you need help. You are wise because you know where your help comes from. The truth is, you were never meant to carry every burden. There's a reason your heart gets heavy. There's a reason your shoulders ache from the invisible weight, because that's not your load to bear. God is the burden bearer. He is the one who said, cast your cares upon me, for I care for you. He's not asking you to ignore your pain. He's asking you to release it. He's not telling you to stop feeling. He's telling you to stop carrying it alone. So many of us walk around holding on to things that should have been released a long time ago. We hold on to disappointment, betrayal, fear, regret, the what ifs, and the could have beens. We carry them from season to season as if our hearts are built to hold them forever. But that's why we're exhausted, not because life is too heavy, but because we keep refusing to let God take what He's already promised to handle. Maybe you've been praying, God, take this away, but still holding on to it in your own strength. Maybe you've been saying you trust Him, but you keep trying to fix it before He does. It's time to release it for real. Because as long as your hands are full of what you're trying to control, they'll never be open enough to receive what God is trying to give. You can't carry the blessing and the burden at the same time. One of them has to go. And I get it. It's hard to let go when you don't know what comes next. It's hard to trust when you've been hurt before. But God isn't asking for blind faith. He's asking for full faith. He's asking for the kind of trust that says, even when I don't see it, I believe you're working. Even when I don't understand it, I trust your hand, because His hands are safer than yours. His plan is greater than your strategy. Sometimes the reason we don't see God move is because we're too busy moving for Him. We're trying to play His role instead of walking in ours. And our role is not to control, it's to trust. It's to believe that if He can hold the stars in place, He can hold your life together too. If He can part the Red Sea, He can make a way in your situation. If He can raise the dead, He can revive your peace, your faith, your hope, your purpose. God never asked you to be your own savior. He asked you to rest in the fact that He already is. You don't have to have it all figured out to be faithful. You don't have to understand the why to keep walking in trust. Sometimes all God wants you to do is take your hands off what's breaking you and lift them in surrender. Because when you lift it up, He takes it from you. You see, peace doesn't come from having control. It comes from knowing who's in control. The moment you stop striving and start surrendering, something shifts inside of you. The weight doesn't disappear immediately, but it becomes lighter because it's no longer on your shoulders. It's in His hands. And His hands don't drop what they hold. His hands never tremble under pressure. His hands are steady, sure, and sovereign. So if you're tired of being tired, maybe it's time to stop carrying what's not yours. Maybe it's time to say, God, I release this. I release the worry, the fear, the pressure to perform. I release the things I can't control. I place every burden in your hand because I believe you're big enough to handle what I'm not, because that's where true freedom begins, not when the storm stops, but when you stop trying to fight it alone. God never intended for you to carry everything alone. He's just waiting for you to finally let go so he can show you what happens when you do. Worry has a way of sneaking into our hearts so quietly that we don't even realize how heavy we've become. It starts small, one thought, one what if, one unanswered question, and before we know it, we're carrying a weight that's too much for our spirit to hold. Worry convinces us that if we think harder, plan longer, or stay anxious enough, we can somehow protect ourselves from what might go wrong. But the truth is, worry doesn't protect you, it drains you. It's a weight that keeps you tied to fear instead of anchored in faith. Some of us have been worrying for so long that it feels normal. You wake up already tense, already rehearsing your problems in your mind before your feet even touch the floor. You try to smile, you try to stay positive, but underneath it all, your heart is heavy. You've been living under the pressure of, what if? What if I fail? What if they leave? What if it doesn't work out? What if I can't recover this time? And yet, no matter how much you worry, nothing changes except your peace. Worry can't rewrite your story. It can't stop pain, it can't fix tomorrow, and it can't bring you peace. It can only rob you of the joy you were meant to have today. God didn't build you to live under the constant tension of fear and doubt. He didn't create your mind to spin endlessly in circles, trying to solve what he's already working out. That's why worry feels so exhausting, because you're carrying a load you weren't designed to hold. You were made to live in faith, not fear. You were made to rest in God's promises, not wrestle with every possibility. The weight you feel isn't just life, it's misplaced trust. You've been trusting your thoughts more than his word. You've been trusting your fear more than his faithfulness. Worry tells you if you stop thinking about it, you'll lose control. But God whispers, oh, if you give it to me, you'll gain peace. The truth is, worry doesn't add anything to your life. It only takes away. It takes your sleep, your focus, your health, your hope. It eats away at your joy and makes you question everything good God is doing. That's why Jesus said, who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Because worry changes nothing, but trust changes everything. You might think, but I can't help it. My mind just keeps going, and I get that. Sometimes worry becomes a reflex. It's what we turn to when we feel powerless. But worry is not the voice of wisdom. It's the echo of fear, and fear is a liar. Fear tells you that if you stop worrying, things will fall apart. But what if they actually start falling into place once you let go? What if God has been waiting for you to release the burden so he can move freely in your situation? Because as long as your hands are gripping the problem, his hands can't fully take over. Sometimes we confuse responsibility with control. You can be responsible without being anxious. You can do your best and still rest in God's timing. Worry is what happens when we cross the line between doing what we can and trying to control what only God can. You've got to learn to say, God, I've done my part. Now I'm trusting you to do yours. That's not denial. That's faith in action. And maybe you've been worrying because things didn't turn out the way you planned. You thought by now you'd be further along, happier, healed, or in a different place. But even when life doesn't look like you imagined, it's still in God's hands. Worry keeps you focused on what's missing, but faith reminds you that God's not finished. When you choose trust over worry, you start to see that even the detours have purpose, even the delays have meaning, even the closed doors were protection. Every time you start to worry, it's a signal. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a reminder that it's time to pray. It's your spirit saying, this is too heavy for me. Every anxious thought is an invitation to shift the weight, to say, God, I can't carry this. But you can, because prayer is the transfer point. It's where the burden leaves your shoulders and rests on His. And when that happens, you may not see the situation change overnight, but something inside you will. You'll start breathing again. You'll start sleeping again. You'll start remembering that peace is still possible in the middle of uncertainty. You are not meant to live weighed down by what might happen tomorrow. God has already stepped into tomorrow and secured it. Worry keeps your eyes on what's ahead, but faith brings your heart back to the present, where grace is waiting, where peace is possible, where God's presence is already enough. You don't have to figure it all out today. You just have to trust that He already has. So the next time worry starts to whisper, remind yourself of this truth. You are not built to carry it. You don't have to hold the weight of the world because the one who made the world is holding you. Let worry go and watch how light life begins to feel again when everything rests in God's hands. Faith doesn't mean you'll never feel fear. It doesn't mean you'll always understand what God is doing or that you'll always feel strong while He's doing it. Faith means that even when fear shows up, you decide not to let it lead. You acknowledge the trembling, but you choose to trust anyway. You might be scared, uncertain, even broken, but you keep believing that God's hand is steady even when your heart isn't. That's what true faith looks like. It's not the absence of fear. It's the decision to believe that God's promise is still greater than what you see. So often we wait for fear to leave before we move. We wait for clarity before we trust. But faith doesn't wait for conditions to be comfortable. Faith steps out even when everything in you wants to stay still. Faith says, I'm not sure how this will work out, but I believe that God is in it. Faith doesn't deny the storm. It chooses to trust the one who can calm it. It doesn't pretend the mountain isn't high. It just believes that the God who spoke the earth into existence can move it. There's something powerful about trusting God when you're scared, because that's the moment your faith becomes real. Anybody can trust when life feels easy. Anybody can praise when things are going right, but when everything feels uncertain and you still whisper, God, I trust you, heaven leans in. That's where growth happens. That's where miracles begin. Because God isn't looking for perfect faith. He's looking for honest faith, the kind that says, nervous, I'm unsure, but I still believe you've got me. Sometimes we think faith is about feeling brave, but faith isn't a feeling. It's a choice. It's waking up every day and saying, I don't know what's coming, but I know who's coming with me. It's showing up to life even when fear tells you not to. It's walking into that situation, that relationship, that dream, and saying, if God brought me here, He's going to carry me through it. Because faith and fear can't both drive. You decide which one gets the keys. Fear has a loud voice. It tells you that you're not ready, not qualified, not enough. It shows you every reason why it might not work. But faith whispers truth, soft, steady, and sure. It reminds you that you don't have to be enough when God already is. It reminds you that even when you can't see the way, God is still making one. Fear screams about your weakness, but faith points to His strength. The moment you stop listening to fear and start leaning into faith, your entire perspective shifts. You might not see what God is doing, but faith reminds you that just because you can't see Him doesn't mean He's not working. God does some of His greatest work in the dark. You can't see seeds growing under the soil, but that doesn't mean they're not taking root. You can't see a wound healing in the moment, but over time you realize the pain was never wasted. Faith trusts that even when nothing makes sense, God is aligning everything for your good. And sometimes faith means trusting that the pain has purpose, that even the tears you've cried are watering something beautiful. You may not understand why certain doors closed, why people left, or why life took a turn you didn't expect. But faith says, God, if you allowed it, then you can use it. Faith doesn't erase the questions. It just anchors you while you wait for the answers. It's easy to get discouraged when things don't happen on your timeline. Fear feeds on delays. It tells you, see, God forgot about you. But faith responds, no, he's preparing me. Faith knows that waiting time isn't wasted time. It's the space where God strengthens your roots so you can handle the blessings he's bringing, because sometimes he delays what you want to give you what you actually need. And if you can trust him in the delay, you'll be ready when the door opens. Faith isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet and steady. It's that inner stillness that says, I don't have to rush this because God's already gone before me. It's peace in motion, moving forward while your heart rests. That's why the enemy fights so hard to make you afraid. Because fear freezes you, but faith frees you. Fear paralyzes, faith propels. Fear builds walls, faith builds bridges. Fear makes you doubt who you are. Faith reminds you whose you are. And maybe you're in a place right now where fear feels louder than faith. Maybe you've prayed and nothing seems to change. But I want you to know, faith doesn't mean you won't feel afraid again. It means that the next time fear shows up, it won't have the same power over you, because now you know where to place it. You place it under the authority of a God who's already conquered everything that could ever threaten your peace. You place it in the hands of a Father who knows how to turn your trembling into triumph. So the next time fear tries to take control, speak back with faith. Tell it, I may not know the outcome, but I know my God. I may not see the path, but I trust the guide. Because every time you choose faith over fear, you break the cycle that keeps you bound. Every time you trust when it doesn't make sense, you remind the enemy that your confidence isn't in the situation. It's in the Savior. And when your faith becomes bigger than your fear, there's nothing that can stop what God is about to do through you. One of the hardest lessons you'll ever learn is how to stop rushing God. We live in a world that moves fast. Everyone wants things instantly, and when something takes time, we start to believe something's wrong. But God doesn't operate on deadlines. He operates on destiny. His timing isn't measured by minutes or months. It's measured by purpose. And sometimes the reason we feel anxious or frustrated is because we've tied our peace to a schedule that God never promised. We get so caught up in what we think should have happened by now. You thought by this age you'd be further along, that the door would have opened, the prayer would have been answered, or the dream would have taken off. You see other people walking into their blessings while you're still waiting, and you start wondering if maybe you missed your moment. But let me remind you, when God writes your story, he never skips a chapter. Delay does not mean denial. Just because it's taking longer than you expected doesn't mean it's not on the way. God's timing isn't late. It's layered. There are things he's working out behind the scenes that you can't see yet. Sometimes he delays the blessing because he's still developing the person who's going to receive it. Sometimes he holds back the opportunity because he knows it would crush you if you got it too soon. We pray for elevation, but God knows that without preparation, promotion can become pressure. So instead of saying, why is it taking so long? Maybe the question should be, what is God strengthening in me while I wait? Because waiting isn't punishment, it's preparation. Waiting builds roots. Waiting matures your faith. Waiting teaches you how to depend on God when you can't depend on timing. It's in the waiting where your worship becomes real, where your patience is tested, and your character is refined. Sometimes the waiting room feels lonely, but it's also holy, because that's where God gets your full attention. He uses time to teach you what quick blessings never could. It's easy to trust God when things happen fast. It's harder when the door stays closed. But what if the closed door isn't rejection? It's protection. What if God's not yet is the only thing keeping you from stepping into something that would have broken you? You see, God knows what's ahead. He knows the weight of what you're asking for, and he knows whether your shoulders are strong enough to carry it. So when he tells you to wait, It's not because he's forgotten. It's because he's faithful. He's aligning pieces, arranging timing, and ensuring that when it happens, it'll happen right. We often want the promise without the process. We want the fruit without the growing season. But God isn't just trying to give you something. He's trying to make you someone. He's shaping you through the wait. The longer it takes, the deeper your trust grows, the stronger your foundation becomes. When you finally walk into what he's prepared for you, you'll be ready to stand firm because you've learned to depend on him, not the outcome. There's something powerful about surrendering your timeline to God. Because when you let go of when, you open the door to how. You stop telling God when to move, and you start trusting how he moves. You stop comparing your journey to others, and you start realizing that your path is personalized for your purpose. What God has for you isn't coming late. It's coming when it's supposed to. And when it arrives, it'll make sense why it couldn't come any sooner. Think about it. If Joseph hadn't been sold, imprisoned, and forgotten, he never would have been in position to save a nation. If David hadn't spent years tending sheep, he wouldn't have learned how to fight lions before facing Goliath. Every delay was divine. Every season of waiting was necessary because what God was building in private was preparing them for what they'd carry in public. And the same is true for you. You might not understand the timing right now, but you don't need to. You just need to keep trusting that the one who controls time knows exactly when to release what belongs to you. Don't let impatience make you settle for something smaller than what God promised. When you try to rush God, you end up stepping outside his will and into your own worry. But when you trust his timing, peace follows. Because peace isn't found in having everything you want. It's found in knowing you're right where you're supposed to be. Maybe this season feels slow. Maybe it feels like nothing's moving. But remember, even when you can't see progress, something is shifting beneath the surface. Seeds grow underground before they ever sprout above the soil. Just because it's unseen doesn't mean it's not happening. God is working while you wait. He's aligning opportunities, softening hearts, and preparing doors you haven't even knocked on yet. So don't despise the delay. Don't rush the process. Trust that God's clock doesn't run behind. It runs perfectly. Every second of waiting is adding strength, adding wisdom, adding depth to who you are. When it finally comes together, you'll realize that his timing wasn't just perfect. It was necessary because God's timing may not always match your plan, but it will always fulfill his promise. There's something powerful that happens when you stop trying to fix everything and start praying about it. Prayer isn't just words you speak into the air. It's the moment your heart connects with heaven. It's where the weight you've been carrying begins to shift from your hands to God's. It's where the chaos in your mind finds quiet, not because everything suddenly makes sense, but because you've decided to place what you don't understand into the hands of the one who does. Prayer isn't weakness. It's a divine exchange. It's saying, God, I'm tired of holding this, and I trust you enough to take it from me. Sometimes we underestimate what happens when we pray because we expect immediate results. We think if we don't see something change, then maybe God didn't hear us. But prayer isn't about instant answers. It's about intimate alignment. It's not about convincing God to move. It's about allowing him to move in us. Every time you pray, even when you don't see it, something shifts in the spiritual realm. Your words become seeds that heaven waters in its own time. You may not see the harvest yet, but God is working the soil. There are some burdens you've been trying to manage on your own for far too long. You've talked to people, you've tried to fix it, you've replayed the problem in your mind 1,000 times, and it's still heavy. That's because it was never meant to be solved by your strength. It was meant to be surrendered through prayer. When you pray, you're not escaping reality. You're inviting God into it. You're giving him access to step into what you can't control and then transform it from the inside out. And here's the thing. Prayer doesn't always change your situation first. Sometimes it changes you. It strengthens your patience, deepens your trust, and reminds you that you're not alone in this. There's a peace that begins to rise inside of you when you truly hand it over. It's that peace that doesn't make sense, the kind that guards your heart and mind when everything around you feels uncertain. That peace doesn't come from answers. It comes from surrender. We live in a world that celebrates control. We're told to plan, to strategize, to take matters into our own hands. But prayer is the opposite of control. It's release. It's the moment you stop wrestling with the outcome and start resting in God's will. It's the moment you stop saying, how will I fix this? And start saying, God, have your way. You see, the more you pray, the lighter your load becomes. Not because the problems disappear, but because you've transferred them to stronger hands. There are times when you'll pray and still cry. You'll pray and still feel the weight for a while. That doesn't mean your prayer didn't work. It means God is teaching you endurance. He's stretching your faith to trust Him even when you can't trace Him. Prayer doesn't guarantee a painless path, but it does promise a powerful peace along the way. You can keep walking through the fire because you know who's walking with you. Sometimes we treat prayer like a last resort when it was meant to be our first response. We say, all I can do is pray, as if prayer is small. But prayer is the most powerful thing you can do. It opens doors no human effort can force open. It breaks chains that words alone can't. It heals what medicine can't touch and restores what time can't fix. Prayer invites God's supernatural into your natural. And when that happens, the impossible becomes possible. Maybe you've been praying for something and haven't seen results yet. Don't give up. Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it won't. God is not ignoring you. He's preparing the right moment. He's working through layers you can't see. Sometimes unanswered prayers are really protected prayers. God heard you the first time. You're just in the waiting phase where He's aligning everything according to His perfect will. The same prayer that feels like silence today might become your testimony tomorrow. And sometimes prayer doesn't change what you ask God to change. It changes how you see it. It gives you strength to face what you wanted to escape. It shifts your heart from panic to purpose. It teaches you that peace doesn't come from everything being okay. It comes from knowing God's got it, even when you don't. When you start living a life rooted in prayer, you begin to notice how differently you carry things. You stop reacting from fear and start responding with faith. You stop running to people first and start running to God. You begin to trust that even when you don't know what to say, the Spirit intercedes for you with groans too deep for words. You start realizing that prayer isn't just what you do, it's who you become. You become someone who doesn't panic when problems come, because you know where to place them. Every time you kneel, every time you whisper that prayer in the middle of the night, every time you lift your hands when your heart is heavy, you are placing your burden in God's hands. And His hands have never dropped what's been placed in them. They are steady, strong, and sovereign. You don't have to hold it anymore. You don't have to carry what's breaking you, because prayer is where your strength ends and God's power begins. There comes a moment when you realize that peace isn't found in having everything figured out. It's found in finally believing that God is in control. We spend so much of our lives trying to manage, fix, and predict every outcome. We want to know how things will unfold, when the door will open, and why certain things happen the way they did. But the truth is, you can't experience rest while you're still trying to run everything yourself. Rest begins where control ends. It's when you stop trying to play God and start trusting that He already has a plan. So many of us are carrying unnecessary pressure because we've convinced ourselves that everything depends on us. We say we trust God, but deep down, we're still holding on to the steering wheel, afraid that if we let go, everything will fall apart. But what if the falling apart is exactly what needs to happen for God to put things back together the right way? What if the thing you're trying to control is the very thing God is trying to free you from? There's peace in surrender, but it's a peace that comes only after you release your grip. Rest doesn't mean doing nothing. It means trusting completely. It's the quiet confidence that says, God, I may not understand it, but I know you're working through it. It's waking up every day with an inner calm, even when everything around you feels chaotic, because you know the outcome doesn't rest on your shoulders, it rests on His sovereignty. When you truly rest in God's promise, you stop panicking about the process. You stop questioning the timing, the route, the detours, and the waiting. You begin to trust that the God who started it will finish it. Sometimes the reason you can't find peace is because you keep revisiting what you already handed over. You pray about it, but then you pick it back up again in worry. You say you're giving it to God, but your mind keeps spinning through all the possible outcomes. Real rest happens when you leave it there. When you stop trying to help God do what He's already capable of doing on His own. You don't have to oversee His work. You just have to believe in it. And I know it's not easy to rest when your world feels uncertain. It's not easy to breathe when you're surrounded by questions that have no answers yet. But peace isn't about the absence of uncertainty. It's about the presence of trust. It's knowing that even when you can't trace God's hand, you can still trust His heart. He hasn't lost control. He hasn't forgotten you. He's still directing the details, even the ones that don't make sense right now. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop reacting from fear and start resting in faith. You begin to see that not every delay is a disaster, not every silence is abandonment, and not every setback is punishment. Some things are simply protection. God will sometimes let doors close because He knows what's behind them isn't meant for you. He'll allow detours because He knows there's danger on the road you were trying to rush down. You don't have to understand it to rest in it. You just have to believe that His plan is still good. Think about how many sleepless nights you've had worrying about things that eventually worked out. How many times you thought you were at the end, but somehow God made a way that's proof enough that He's faithful. You didn't hold your life together then, and you don't have to hold it together now. The same God who provided before is still providing. The same God who carried you through that storm will carry you through this one too. When you truly rest in God, your perspective changes. You stop asking, why me? And start saying, use me. You stop focusing on the chaos and start focusing on His character. You stop letting fear narrate your story and start letting faith guide your steps. You realize that even in the middle of uncertainty, God is steady. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And when your life is anchored in Him, no storm can shake your peace. Rest isn't passive, it's powerful. It takes courage to say, God, I trust you even here. Even when I can't see what's next. Even when the answer hasn't come, it's a declaration that you believe His will is better than your plan. When you rest in that truth, worry loses its grip, fear loses its voice, and peace takes its place. You start to live differently. You stop reacting to every storm and start resting in the assurance that the storm still answers to your God. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stop striving and start resting. Stop trying to figure out how it's all going to work and start trusting that it already is. God doesn't need your panic. He needs your permission to move. And He moves best in hearts that are still. So right here, right now, make the decision to rest. Rest in the promise that God's hand is steady even when your world feels shaky. Rest in the truth that He's in control even when life feels out of control. Rest in knowing that He's already written the ending and it ends in victory. Because when you learn to rest in His control, you'll discover a peace that no storm can take away.